Although I use the word God or goddess, but that I think that will still remain the same. This strange yellow guy is sitting in front of me. Okay. Once upon a time, there was a company. And a company that found it very important that the customers they have came in through a really straightforward process, that they had to use the driver's licenses to get an account. So you need to use your driver's license so they could see if it's genuinely you. So you had to take a picture. Is the picture the same that you have made compared to that on the driver's license? Right? It's that simple. So they are really eager to get the right persons in. So that's quite important. So they found a product, an AI product, that could help them. It was based on machine learning, and I will explain what I mean with machine learning. It was based on machine learning, and they could just buy it off the shelf. It was available in the store. So they bought it, put it in their architecture, and they used it. So, great addition to what they already had. They really could check if it was really the right person that wanted to become a customer. What can go wrong? Nothing went wrong. All the checks were green, everything went wrong. No issues were detected. Although there was a person in that organization that looked into the logging and all the information that was available, and they did see some people coming in which were not legitimate. They did came in, and they were not really the right persons. So they found some driver's licenses fraud. Multiple fraud cases, they had to fall back to manual verification. And they had to look at it. What was the root cause? What did go wrong? And as you can see in these driver's licenses, these guys are not born in 1975. These guys are looking very young. And we know who are the best testers. Our end users, right? Our customers know how to test it. So they did. They found out that the checking done by AI didn't work properly. Hey, interesting. So they had to run for an analysis. So what did they see? Algorithms used to fraud with Dutch driver's licenses yet. It was in the Netherlands. But I bought a product that couldn't check Dutch driver's licenses. That's quite a problem, right? They didn't read the small print in the contract. And there was something else also. Obvious fraud was not flagged. And there was also something else. Certain new checks were not in place yet. What? They didn't even configure it. Obviously, that could have lowered the chance. And you know what? The next picture I'm going to show you, I didn't look for that picture. They used it themselves. I have no idea what I'm doing. But when you hear a story like that, and I heard it, I thought, that's great. I can use that for a presentation. This is a great starting point to talk about how to test AI, how to look at AI. So that's what I'm going to tell you. What should they have done differently to get AI into your system, use it properly, and let's go through the complete process of getting the product into production and look at it from the quality and testing point of view. I will tell you what I mean with AI implementation, and is it really different than what we have done before? That is what I'm going to cover in this presentation. But who am I? Who is Ard? My name is Ard Kramer. As I already mentioned, I come from the Netherlands, and I work for a small consultancy company with the name of OrangeCrest. I have about like 30 colleagues. I'm also into sport, passive into sport. Together with my daughter, my beautiful daughter, I go to football in Rotterdam, where I live. I live very close to Rotterdam, so we go back to the stadium. Some quality time. Besides that, I'm also up to my ears into volleyball. At the moment, I'm one of the 7 members of the national board of the Dutch Volleyball Federation, and that gives me sometimes the opportunity to give people some medals, although it's quite a challenge for me because all those volleyball players are quite tall, so I have to be short. That also gives me sometimes an opportunity to go to interesting venues. I was there last year. It was really beautiful place to see some beach volleyball. And besides that, I also sometimes be on stage on different conferences, but that's not important. Let's talk about AI. What do I mean with AI? And I'm really focusing on the AI that makes businesses more efficient. So if you're looking at AI, I'm just looking at machine learning and deep learning. And as I gave you the example, and I will use that example throughout my presentation, it's all about machine learning. And what is machine learning? That is about analyzing large amounts of data, discovering patterns, do predictions, and all kinds of decision making. And of course, also in the businesses, we use deep learning. That's more like the large language models. It's more also improve the human interaction. So like I said, I'm going to focus on machine learning because it's used a lot in businesses. But how does AI work? AI, if you really look at it from a high abstracted level, in fact, it's nothing more than you put some data in it, it processes, and something comes out of it. And although the example was already used on the conference by a different speaker, I do have the tendency that some people say, okay, that looks like a box. And then you think, okay, box, box, box. Then you think like the Pandora's box, right? Because it also has a lot of things to do that we have a lot of trust in what's happening inside that box, inside that AI. A lot of things happening and something comes out of it and we trust it. That reminds me of a statement that a colleague of mine once did. And she said, in God we trust, the rest we test. And as you probably know that Pandora's box is given to us in Greek mythology by the gods. And in fact, it was given to us out of revenge. The revenge was that we stole fire from the gods and they gave us Pandora's box. And there was a lot of disaster inside that box, a lot of things that can go wrong. So in God we trust, the rest we test, but we even can trust the gods because they give something like that. Okay, so I think we should be very critical about what AI gives to us. But maybe I can explain AI better in a more schematic way, in a kind of a model. And I know every model is wrong, but it has some valuable information to a certain extent. And this is what I stumbled upon as a model of AI. And going from left to right, it's all about data going in. And that can be all kinds of data, raw data, unstructured data, and it uses that data to learn from. And that's what the process starts, right? It starts with training. What can we do with all that data? Can you recognize patterns? Can you classify it? And also never forget that a lot of training is done by humans. For example, a lot of people in Africa are doing the training for AI. Let's be very clear about that. So they train the data to recognize those patterns. But you also need, which is on top, is the judgment. It needs to have a kind of a frame when it's going to be okay or not okay. So that is also linked to the purpose that you want to use for. If it's doing the right things. If it's talking about driver's licenses, are you looking at the right things? Are you looking at the right numbers? Are you looking at the picture? Are you looking at specifics on that driver's licenses? That's also framed with judgment. And out of that judgment and that training comes a prediction. A prediction, yes, this is a legitimate driver's license, as you can continue by logging in, as the example I just gave. And of course, the prediction is the core of AI. And out of that core comes a decision, an action. Yeah, that driver's license is allowed. He can become or she can become a customer. Of course, there's going to be some output. And that output, as I gave also in the example, that output is also to continue with all the signing in into the system. It is a good customer. You can trust him. We can continue, and he can place an order or whatever he likes. But there's also kind of the orange box that there's some feedback. Sometimes you have to look, does it still recognize all the things that is okay? And if it's not okay, you have some feedback loops. Maybe you have to improve the training, or maybe you should adjust the judgment. And of course, out of that also comes the outcome, the value that it has. There's also one big certainty that we have if we're looking at AI. The certainty that we have is that the outcome is a probability. You never know if it's going to be completely true. Keep that in mind. The outcome, and that's also what Paul Girard was referring to, there is something like hallucination can happen. The outcome is changing continuously. So we have to look for a probability. Is it really true? How are we going to look at it? So let's go back to the AI implementation using the driver's licenses, and how should they have done it differently? Of course, it all starts with the end in mind, and that's also what Deming said, is what is the outcome we're looking for? Why are we using the driver's licenses? Oh, that we can have a right customer coming in. And of course, AI is used in multiple different ways, and luckily, there are some regulations coming up also to look at AI if it's really trustworthy. Are we using it for the right reasons? And this is the EU regulations, and they start to work it out. AI is not, you're not able to use AI in all kinds of different circumstances. If it's like in high risk, like social scoring, mass surveillance, within the EU, it is prohibited. But it also says that if it has a high risk, and of course we are risk aware as testers, that we look at, for example, if you use it for cars, components or cars, just cars, that's all, just cars. Also law enforcement, etc. You need to have conformity assessment. You know, conformity assessment, isn't that what we do? Test it, check it, see if it's okay. Hey, so I think that we're still going to be in a job for many, many years. And also, if your outcome has a limited risk, you need to be transparent on when you're going to use it. Like chatbots you're talking to, but I will give you an example about a chatbot. And when it has a minimal risk, there's no obligation. The way Netflix uses it is, or Spotify, that's also AI. There's no obligation there. So, we were at the beginning. Think for using. Let's do the preparation, right? So, looking again at the model, if we start thinking about testing the driver's licenses as an AI system, we definitely should look at the data. What kind of data is coming in? What's the quality of the data? Is it tested correctly? And of course, we know garbage in, garbage out, so data is quite important. But what is the quality of the data? Because the quality of the data will also determine if we are looking at it in the right way. Did they test it? They tested only on English driver's licenses. They didn't do it on Dutch driver's licenses. So you knew that there was going to be a problem. But also all that data that is used in AI is very interesting for people outside the organization. So imagine you that all the data is there about driver's licenses. If you could just steal all that information, what could you do with it? Or maybe put some extra data into the system so that you can become a customer because it recognizes your fake driver's license. So that's quite important. And also that data should be trustworthy. And I do have an example which comes from the Netherlands, that data can also be biased. That there's some examples in that data that it is not used in the right way. And this is an example in the Netherlands where there was some data that was ethnically colored. This is the child's, I also have to look for a word for it. It's a child benefit scandal. So you get money from the Dutch government when your kids go to childcare, but our tax department had some data in it which was ethnically colored. And that is really a problem because people were selected as potential fraud based on double nationality or more of that kind of characteristics, and that's really bad. That's not how you should use the data inside an AI system. So you be really aware of that. Am I using the right data? If you look at the process, it's also important how you look at it. And I think these are very important quality attributes inside that model that you need to pay attention to. Because if you're talking about judgment, prediction, and also training, look how accurate it is. For example, if the training is over or underfitting, then you will have a problem. Then it will push somebody out which has a good driver's licenses or doesn't recognize the incorrect driver's licenses from that point on. Besides that, you always have to look for performance. How fast is the response? If somebody wants to sign in, he wants to do it fast. He wants to use the product, so it shouldn't take that long. But it also is about fairness. Just the example that I gave, also within the system, it needs to be fair. So it also has to cover different groups. If somebody is really green, orange, or blue, that's allowed. That should be treated fair. And also the judgments should be having the right thresholds. Based on what is the outcome I'm looking for, is this really judging the driver's licenses in a correct way? And of course, the decision that comes out of it, that needs to be an expected behavior. That needs to have the right data format so that we can continue with that. But mostly, we don't look inside that process. It's more like this, or when you're looking, it's more like that. Hey, but that's a black box, and we are testers, right? We know how to test a black box, don't we? And as I said before, we know that the outcome is a probability. There will be different outputs continuously. So how could we tackle that from a testing point of view? I would say falsify. Not verify, not validate, falsify. Falsifying is something that I made up. It just comes from research, right? Karl Popper, long time ago, said, we can never prove something, we only can look for evidence that it is not correct. Hey, that's quite interesting, also looking from the testing point of view. So, how you should be able to test on hypothesis, because this is how falsification works. You have an hypothesis, you think, this is kind of a statement, and I will give you some examples of statements. You run some experiments, you get some results out of it, and you draw a conclusion. So what would be interesting hypothesis if you're testing the system, as I just mentioned, about the driver's licenses? So if you're talking about accuracy, for example, how many times will it recognize an invalid driver's licenses? And you have to set a limit. I wanted that has to be like 95% correct, because the outcome is a probability. So sometimes you will have false negatives or false positives. So think about that. This is kind of a hypothesis, and I'm going to do some research. I'm going to run a lot of tests to see what will be the output of that. Will there be 95, 93, or 97%? If you're looking at reliability, that if that driver's license has a degradation, sometimes English is quite hard, has a degradation, does it still recognize as a good driver's license, as a driver's license that is allowed? And how many times or to what extent does it work properly? Investigate, do your research, look for it. And also looking at performance. Does it still give the same response when you're having an incredibly high load? What about robustness? If a driver's license is not correctly, it's old, you know it's in your pocket and sometimes it wears off, it degrades also in that kind of quality, does it still be recognized as a legitimate driver's license? And also bias and fairness. You have to test it with all kinds of different people on those pictures and on those driver's licenses. If they're green, blue, orange, whatever color they are they still recognized as a person compared to the picture that you also had to make with the system? And of course, the error handling should also be great. Does the message on your screen really tell you the right story? So, we're ready. We came up with some hypotheses, so let's do some testing. But how do you know that all that probability that comes out of it is correct? And even Greek mythology had a solution for that. Delphi, an oracle. You can use an oracle. Somebody has really know how a driver's license look like. She or he can help you out and says, this is a good driver's license. This is really what you can use. That is also something that is legitimate. So you can use oracles because you need them. And I'm going to just give you a very simple example of something that you still are responsible for the output that's coming out of it. Because this is the example of Air Canada, who was using a chatbot. And a chatbot, of course, gives answers to people. So there was a person that asked a question to the chatbot. I'm not able to fly tomorrow. Can I have a refund? And the chatbot said, yeah, you can have a refund. So what did the guy do? He sent his ticket to Air Canada, and he got a response from customer support. No, you're not going to have a refund. Yeah, but the chatbot said that I got a refund. So he went to court, as they do. And because the chatbot speaks in name of that company, they had to pay. So in that case, you needed a really good lawyer when you're testing a chatbot like that. Because he can say, okay, the answer that chatbot is giving right now, that's not correct, legally seen, because a little print inside our contract says that that guy shouldn't have a refund. So you need a very good oracle that can help you out. Okay. We've done the preparation by writing down the hypothesis. We run a lot of test cases, see what the output was, although it is a probability. So how are you going to report on AI? Because how are you going to report when you're falsifying things? Falsifying means that you never can prove that it works. But what can you say then? The best thing you can say, I've tested the AI, but I found no results indicating that it does not function. That's what you can say. You can never promise anything. The only thing you can say is, all the things I've tested, all the hypotheses I investigated, I haven't found any big proof that it doesn't work. That's the way that Popper thought this is how research should be done. So you're all researchers. You should be a good researchers and then falsify your software. Okay. This is what we gave back to our stakeholders, and they were happy with it. They had enough confidence that it was good enough. We had the thresholds, like 95%. It was above, so it was trustworthy. But that still means when you go into production that you have to keep an eye on it. Because you have to do some regression testing, but also model drifting is very important. Software is never stable, right? Keep that in mind. If you put all kinds of new data into a system, it will change things. And is it going to be still reliable as the 95% as I just stated? You need to keep on looking. You need to have observability or telemetry there to see if it still hits that same bar, that 95%. And of course, also AI will provide new versions. They need to be tested. They need to be falsified in the same way. Okay, the final story. As I tried to tell you, there are many things uncertain in testing AI. So, I think you shouldn't trust AI. I think that should be a thing that we were looking for. And if you bring it back to Pandora's box, you can see there's a lot of bad things coming out of that box. Violence, death, pain, all the things that can go wrong if you don't test it right. But there is also one thing left behind inside that box, and maybe that refers to us. There's also something like hope in that box. And maybe we should be the persons that provide that hope, that provide that information as best as possible as we can, so that we're doing the right things with AI. And just don't push it from the shelf and say, oh, it's going to work. Don't trust AI. So in God we trust, the rest we test. Don't trust those gods. Thank you very much.
How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good.
Okay, that's good to hear. So far we have one question, so maybe you're free to go in a few seconds. Much content on internet is AI generated / edited. This in turn will be used to train future LLMs. Is this a risk of incorrect info being amplified?
Yes, definitely is.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, it definitely. Like I said, the data that goes in needs to be really reliable. So how do you know? Unless you have full control of what goes in, no garbage going in, that's at least the best thing you can do. So yes, It's an interesting also to look at it. If the data that AI generates and goes into the system and is reused again, but if its starting point is not that good, will it do a degradation? So the average will go down. Something to think about, right?
Oh, whoa, whoa, in the last second we got another one. Should ChatGPT share blame for the Air Canada error?
Nope.
No.
Nope.
Okay.
Never.
No.
Now, the answer is quite simple. If you use AI, you still are responsible for what you're doing. That is inevitable. If you build something together as a company, you are still reliable. That's also the old story, like Gita was also referring to outsourcing. We outsource it, so they're responsible. No, they are not responsible. You can't outsource quality or the responsibility for quality. Whose name is going to be in the paper next day? Not the name of ChatGPT, not the name of the company that you outsource to. Your name is going to be in the paper. You are responsible for that. That's a very simple answer to that one.
Very clear, and you're free to go. No more questions. Huge applause, ladies and gentlemen, for Ard Kramer for this amazing presentation. Thank you so very much.